that is St. George. And St. George is killing a dragon here, which is what St. George is always doing. And he's rescuing this princess, which is, maybe he's not too thrilled about that because he was expecting a big pile of gold, but turns out that if you have gold, you can get princesses, so it's basically the same thing. Actually, it turns out if you know how to get gold, you can get princesses, because princesses aren't that stupid, and you can fool them with gold, but if you force them to make a choice, they'll go for the guy who knows how to get the gold instead of the guy that has the gold and doesn't know how to get it. And that's because our tree-dwelling ancestresses were very happy when the first of our tree-dwelling ancestors figure out how to drop a really big stick on a really ugly predatory snake. And that happened a long time ago, like 60 million years. And so this is a really old story. And here's the story. The story is something like, well, when you're out there doing things, sometimes that doesn't work. And when you're where what you're doing is working, you're in one place. And when you're where what you're doing isn't working, you're in another place. And the place you are when where you're doing isn't working is a chaotic state. And the chaotic state is the state that surrounds what you know, in a sense, and that's where all the predators are, fundamentally. That's when you've accidentally wandered out of your safe territory, and that's where the predators lurk. And the system that we use to conceptualize the things that lurk outside our conceptual system is the same system that our ancestors used to detect predators. So we're abstract creatures, and so we think of prey, predator, but then you could think of conception, anomaly, and it's the same idea. And that's why here's a very loose association, but the snake in the Garden of Eden is a predator because it's a snake, but it's also the thing that always pokes its ugly head up in the middle of your paradises. And there's just no getting away from that. And then the question is, well, what should you do with snakes of life? And one answer is you should scream and run, or you should freeze, which is what a rabbit would do. But it turns out that if you don't do either of those, if you approach the anomalous thing, then you get the treasure that it guards. And I love this image. It's so intelligent because what it says is that, well, if you face the chaotic expanse of life, then that makes you the sort of creature that appeals to potential mates. And there is absolutely no doubt that that's the case, because one of the things we know, for example, about women is they mate up and across and up dominance hierarchies. They like the dominant guys. Women are choosy maters. Chimpanzee females, by the way, aren't. So then the question is, who's the most dominant male? Well, you know, maybe he's the guy with the biggest sword, or maybe he's the football player, and that's a possibility too. But there's the guy who wins the game, and he's pretty dominant, and then there's the guy who wins the game of games, and he's so much more dominant than the guy that wins the games that they're not even in the same universe. And women, because you can't fool them because they're quite smart, if they have the opportunity, will always pick the guy who wins the game of games over the guy that wins the game.
How do you find, on that topic, the love of your life?
That's a good question. I was asked that multiple times on my tour, 3 times in a row, in fact, because we asked people to use this Slido gadget.
That's a popular question?
It always came up to the top. And I got asked that 3 times in a row, and I didn't have a good answer. And then I thought, why don't I have a good answer? I thought, oh, I know why. Because that's a stupid question. So why?
Yeah.
Why? Because it's putting the cart before the horse. Here's the right question. How do I make myself into the perfect date? You answer that question, and you will not have any problem answering the previous question. It's like, what do I want in a partner? If I offered everything I could to a partner, who would I be? You work on that. Ask that question. Just ask. Just ask yourself, okay, I have to be the person that women would want. Okay, what do they want? Clean. That's not a bad start. Reasonably good physical shape. So healthy, productive, generous, honest, willing to delay gratification. So you dance with a woman. It's like, what's she doing? What are you two doing? Well, it's a pattern. There's patterns happening around you. That's the music. Patterns of being. That's the music. Now, can you align yourself with the patterns of being gracefully? That's what she's checking out. And then can you do that with her? And then can you do that in a playful and attentive manner and keep your bloody hands to yourself for at least a minute? And so, can you dance in a playful manner? It's like you can go through this in your imagination, and you'll know. And then you think, well, how far am I from those things? And the answer is usually, man, it's a pretty horrible abyss separating you from that ideal. But the harder you work on offering other people what they need and want, the more people will line up to play with you. And so it's the wrong question. It's like, how can I be the best partner possible? And then you think, well, if I do that, people will just take advantage of me. And that's the non-naive objection, right? Because the naive person's think, well, I'll be good and everyone will treat me right. It's like the cynic says, no, I'll be good and someone will take me out. And then you think, well, what do you do about that objection? And the answer is, well, you factor that in. And that's why you're supposed to be, what is it? As soft as a dove and as wise as a serpent. It's like, I know you're full of snakes. I know it. Maybe I know it more than you do. But we'll play anyways. And
Take
that's
the risk anyway.
That's right. Voluntarily, right? It's like, and what's so cool about that is that even though the person you're dealing with is full of snakes, if you offer your hand in trust and it's real, you will evoke the best in them. I don't believe that women do have a tendency to prefer bad men higher in dark triad traits. They may have a tendency to be more erotically attracted to men who are capable of manifesting dominance and aggression. I think the evidence for that is relatively clear. And I don't think the Bible at all describes a mode of being as associated with nice guy traits. I don't know. That may be how it's classically taught, for example, because Christ is often presented, especially in more simple-minded variants, and I'm not being pejorative about that precisely, as the ultimate in nice guys, but I don't think that that's true at all. That's a reasonable characterization at all if you read the gospel accounts, because he was someone who was certainly capable of saying very, very harsh things to people, and was also identified very strongly as a figure who was capable of using judgment and distinguishing between what was positive and what was negative. And that capacity for judgment is something quite different than the mere nice guy compassion that would be associated with high levels of trait agreeableness. So I think that the idea that the ideal that's put forward in the biblical writings is something like be harmless, I think that's a real misreading of the text. And I also think that it's wrong, because harmless and good are not the same thing at all. And in fact, I think one of the best ways of characterizing like a higher order morality, and this is something that Nietzsche talked about a fair bit, is that, and Jung as well, with regards to the idea of integration of the shadow, is that someone who's moral has the capability for violence and the capability for aggression built in and at hand, but is also someone who's perfectly capable of controlling that in a civilized manner. And I think that, I'm speaking off the cuff here, obviously, but I think that the attraction that some women have for the sort of men who are more likely to misbehave, to act in a delinquent manner and so forth, is partly their desire to be associated with men who